All right, wow, looks like we're going deep on this one.
Yeah, definitely a lot here.
Essentialism. The disciplined pursuit of less, huh?
So, Greg McKeown's book.
Less, but better. I like the sound of that already.
Yeah, sign me up too, right?
But seriously, how does that work, doing less but better?
Well, that's what we're diving into, I guess.
It almost feels counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does, right?
Yeah.
Like you work hard to achieve success.
Exactly. And then success is the problem.
That's exactly what he calls it.
The paradox of success.
The paradox of success. Uh-huh.
So what? You start with a clear goal, see those early wins.
Right. And then, more opportunities come along.
And then it's just more and more until you're spread so thin.
Pulled in a million directions. Like
one of those spinning carnival rides, reaching for the brass ring.
Yeah. Just getting dizzy.
Exactly.
Well, McKeown says that all that energy just scatters us.
And it takes us away from, what actually matters.
Some of our most important work, yeah.
So what's the alternative?
Yeah. Well, he tells a pretty personal story about this, actually.
About his wife giving birth.
You remember that?
Yeah, that one really got to me because,
Yeah, he chose a client meeting over being there for his family.
Right, and it's not that he was being heartless or anything.
No, I think he thought it was, the responsible thing to do.
But it shows how we convince ourselves we're doing what's necessary.
When we're just reacting to the loudest demands.
Yeah. Instead of, stepping back and thinking about what truly matters.
Exactly.
Big wake-up call for me.
For a lot of us, I think.
It made me think about law school and that pressure to keep all your options open.
Like you'd have more freedom.
Right. But really, I just felt scattered and overwhelmed.
I was taking extra classes, internships, even joined clubs that didn't even interest me.
Because I felt like I should.
But looking back,
all those open doors.
They were actually blocking
the path to what I actually cared about.
Which is what McKeown talks about with that Warren Buffett comparison.
Oh, yeah. Buffett, he doesn't just, put a little money in everything.
Right. He makes very specific investments, a few, and commits to them.
He's not afraid to close some doors.
And fully commit to what he believes in.
So true.
So yeah, maybe real freedom
comes from choosing to close some doors.
On purpose, even.
But then the question is, how do we know which doors to close?
Yeah.
Tough one.
Right. It feels risky.
Well, that's where trade-offs come in.
Trade-offs.
McKeown uses a great example, Southwest Airlines.
Oh, yeah, I remember this.
It's interesting. Their success.
It's not about being the best at everything.
No, not at all.
They're known for their low fares.
Right, but no fancy meals.
No assigned seats.
They only do point-to-point flights.
And they've streamlined everything to keep those prices low.
Exactly.
So it's not about sacrificing quality.
No, it's about being strategic,
You choose where to excel.
Exactly.
I'm working on a project right now.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm trying to take everyone's feedback into account.
But it's starting to feel bloated.
Losing focus.
Yeah, what trade-offs can I make to get it back to its core?
The Southwest example shows how being clear about what you won't do
is just as important as what you will do.
Totally.
We're not going to be everything to everyone.
Right.
But we will be the absolute best at this specific thing.
Absolutely.
It reminds me of, Johnson & Johnson.
Oh, yeah. How they handled the Tylenol crisis.
Right, when there was cyanide poisoning.
Yeah, they could have tried to hide it.
But they chose to put consumer safety first.
Ahead of profits, even.
It must have cost a fortune to pull all that Tylenol off the shelves.
But in the long run, it built trust.
Absolutely. It was a moral decision, not just a business decision.
Yeah, very values-driven.
But what happens when you're facing these tough choices and you don't have that clear sense of values?
You need to make space for reflection.
Space for reflection.
McKeown talks about Isaac Newton.
Oh.
He said he discovered gravity by thinking on it continually.
Continually think.
Yeah, it's a reminder that sometimes...
It's not about frantically doing.
It's about letting our minds wander and make connections.
So it's not about having those eureka moments.
Yeah, no, it's about getting clarity on what truly matters.
He talks about his own writing process, monk mode, for 8 hours a day.
8 hours?
While writing this book.
Wow, no wonder he uncovered so many insights.
But realistically, who has 8 hours a day for that?
He also mentions Bill Gates.
Okay.
Think weeks.
Oh, right.
Even with Microsoft, Gates would take a week, twice a year, just to reflect.
If Bill Gates can find the time.
Makes you think about our priorities, right?
It doesn't have to be a whole week, though.
Sure.
Even small changes, like 20 minutes every morning just reading.
Yeah, mini think weeks, basically.
I've been trying that, and it really helps to center me before the day gets crazy.
That's great.
But even with that, it's still hard to sift through all the information overload.
Oh, absolutely.
What's essential and what's just noise.
Yeah, remember that Nora Ephron story?
about her journalism teacher.
Yeah.
He said journalism isn't just about reporting the facts, it's about understanding the point.
Why it matters.
Why it matters, yeah.
It's easy to get lost in the noise.
So we need to become journalists of our own lives.
Looking for the headlines.
I love that. So we're not just passively consuming everything that comes our way.
We need to be more discerning.
And he suggests journaling to capture those insights.
Yeah, but journaling can be tough to stick with.
Oh, tell me about it.
He had a good tip. Write less than you feel like.
Oh, okay.
Instead of those long, epic entries.
Just small observations.
Right, which takes the pressure off.
And then, looking back at those entries,
You can see patterns.
connect the dots.
Exactly.
So we're creating space, we're learning to be more discerning,
But the real challenge
is letting go of the non-essential stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's hard.
That's where we have to face that sunk cost bias.
The tendency to cling to things, even when they're not serving us anymore.
Just because we've already put time or energy into them.
Or money.
Like finishing a bad book because you're already halfway through.
Exactly. Or think about the Concorde project.
Oh, right.
Technological marvel, but a financial black hole.
And the more money they poured in?
The harder it was to admit defeat.
It's scary how easily we can get trapped by those sunk costs.
That guy Henry Gribome, remember?
Oh, the one who spent his life savings trying to win an Xbox at a carnival.
So sad, a classic example.
Makes you think about what we're holding on to in our own lives that we need to let go of.
For sure.
I have so many clothes I never wear, projects I started and will never finish.
We all do.
So how do we break free from that sunk cost trap?
McKeown has some strategies.
Okay.
One is to pretend you don't own something.
Before you decide whether to keep it.
Yes. So, like, if you didn't have this, would you go buy it now?
That's such a smart way to look at it.
Takes out the emotion.
And he also suggests running reverse pilots.
Oh, right. Temporarily remove something from your life.
And see what happens.
If it doesn't make a negative impact, let it go.
So it's not about what we might lose, but the opportunity cost of holding on.
Exactly.
I love that.
So once we've cleared out some space,
The next step is to protect it.
with boundaries,
Oh, boundaries. Tell me about Jin Young.
she stood up to her manager.
Must have been terrifying
But she realized always being available was actually hurting her team.
because she was always putting out fires.
Instead of focusing on the bigger picture,
So what happened? Did her manager respect those boundaries?
surprisingly, yes.
Wow.
It actually earned her more respect.
Because she was a leader who prioritized what was important.
It's like you teach people how to treat you.
I love that saying.
And Clayton Christensen, he would turn down anything that didn't align with his priorities.
Speaking engagements, media requests, even.
It wasn't selfish, it was self-respect
It was protecting his time.
for his most important work,
So we need to get comfortable saying no.
without over-explaining.
I know it's hard.
It takes practice.
But even with the best boundaries,
Life happens.
unexpected things.
That's where buffers come in.
Buffers, okay.
He uses the race to the South Pole as an example.
Oh, wow. Edmondson and Scott.
You know it?
Intense. What happened?
Edmondson planned for everything.
Okay.
Delays, equipment failures, bad weather. He built in buffers
He was prepared
to cut corners.
and hoped for the best.
Yeah,
So Edmondson reached the South Pole
and returned safely.
while Scott and his team.
Died on the way back.
It's a stark reminder about underestimating risk.
That's a good one. We need to factor in potential delays.
Adjust our expectations.
Exactly.
So we're making choices, setting boundaries, creating buffers.
It all comes down to execution.
Okay, so how do we execute effectively?
Starting small, building momentum.
Through small wins.
He talks about the Richmond Police Department.
Okay.
They had a positive tickets system.
Interesting.
They decided to reward kids for good behavior.
Instead of focusing on punishment.
And it completely transformed their relationship with the community.
I bet. It's amazing how a shift in perspective can lead to such a change.
It shows the power of focusing on what we want to see more of.
Instead of what we want to eliminate.
Yeah.
So instead of tackling huge goals all at once.
Break them down into smaller steps.
He calls it minimal viable preparation.
What's the smallest action you can take right now?
I love that. It makes it so much easier to get started.
Those charity thermometer charts.
Yes. You can see the progress, even if it's small.
So motivating.
And he also talks about routines.
Oh yeah, the more we can automate those essential tasks.
The less willpower we need.
I have a morning routine now.
Me too. Makes a huge difference.
It used to be chaos, but now
I'm out the door with so much less stress.
that's the power of routines.
But we don't want to get stuck in a rut either.
Right. McKeown says we need variety too.
To keep things interesting.
He gives the example of Jack Dorsey.
Yeah, from Twitter.
He divides his week into themes.
Each day focused on a different aspect of the business.
So, structure and flexibility.
I laugh.
Finding the sweet spot.
We were talking about triggers earlier.
Right. Those cues that prompt a certain behavior.
I'm really curious about how to use those strategically.
Well, he says we're already surrounded by triggers.
Whether we realize it or not.
Like that bag of chips on the counter. That's a trigger for snacking.
Right.
But what if you replace it with a bowl of fruit?
You're changing your environment.
To make it easier to choose the essential behaviors.
It's like playing mental chess with ourselves.
Setting ourselves up for success.
I love it.
By understanding triggers.
We can become architects of our own choices.
Exactly.
You know, this conversation is really showing how essentialism goes way beyond just getting things done.
It's a whole way of thinking.
Approaching life with intention.
Absolutely.
And McKeown takes us next to this idea of living in the present moment.
Oh yeah, chronological time versus kairos time.
Kairos. So recognizing the opportune moment.
There's a time for everything.
But how do you distinguish between the two?
Yeah, it's so easy to get stuck in the past.
Or worry about the future.
He tells a story about feeling overwhelmed after a long day of teaching. And he just stopped, took a breath, and asked himself, what's important now?
Such a simple question.
But powerful, right?
Like a reset button.
He was able to get clarity, focus on what mattered right then.
We put so much pressure on ourselves to be constantly doing.
Instead of just being.
We forget we have the power to choose what to focus on.
And to help with that, he suggests writing things down.
So you don't have to worry about forgetting.
You can stay present.
Like a mental inbox.
Yes, exactly.
And then he talks about the dangers of multitasking.
Oh, yeah.
Is it really a myth that we can do multiple things at once?
He says he has this funny story about a former classmate.
What do you do?
He was constantly switching between tasks, even checking his phone mid-conversation.
I know those people.
Like they're afraid of missing out.
But they end up missing the present moment.
Exactly. McKeown says, focus on one thing at a time.
Give it your full attention.
He calls it multi-focusing.
I love that.
It's about intention.
He even recommends using a timer.
To dedicate blocks of time to a single task.
I've tried that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much I can get done when I'm not constantly switching.
Your brain can breathe.
And think deeply.
Yeah.
And ultimately.
All of this leads to making a meaningful contribution.
To the world.
Right. And he talks about Gandhi.
Oh yeah, Gandhi lived a remarkably simple life.
Focused on his mission.
He talked about reducing himself to zero.
Stripping away everything non-essential. Simple clothes. He avoided newspapers to reduce mental clutter.
Even simplified his diet.
He had a day of silence each week.
That's incredible. It shows that real impact doesn't come from accumulating things.
It's about focusing on what truly matters.
And his impact was undeniable.
Inspired millions.
We don't need extravagant lives to make a difference.
We can all live more intentionally.
Contribute in ways that align with our values.
His story's so inspiring.
It shows that essentialism is a way of being.
Not just a self-help strategy.
And he reminds us it's not about achieving some perfect ideal.
It's a journey.
Of learning and growth. He even talks about his own struggles with applying these principles.
It makes it relatable.
So it's not about beating ourselves up for not being essential enough.
Right. It's about finding what works for you.
One step at a time.
Exactly.
So how does he stay focused on what matters most?
He mentions two things.
Okay.
Family, first of all.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And then our own mortality.
Not in a morbid way, though.
No, as a motivator.
Our time is precious.
Make the most of every moment.
Essentialism is about living a life without regret.
Making choices we can be proud of.
Choices that reflect our values.
It's about asking ourselves.
At the end of my life, what will I wish I had spent my time on?
That's a powerful question.
It really gets to the heart of it.
It does.
It does.
Welcome back. You know, we were talking about effortless execution before.
Oh, yeah, and I immediately think routines when I hear that.
Me too, and McKeown dives right into it.
Using Michael Phelps.
His pre-race routine.
Down to a science.
From the warm-up to how he stepped on the block, all choreographed.
It makes you think, how much mental energy did that free up?
It probably helped him stay focused with all that Olympic pressure.
So it's not just about time, it's mental space, too.
For peak performance.
There's neuroscience to this, too, right?
When we repeat actions, the neural pathways get stronger.
It's like building a habit at the neurological level.
We're training our brains like a muscle.
My morning routine isn't Olympic level or anything, but since I created a sequence, it's made a huge difference.
Less stress in the mornings.
I used to just fly by the seat of my pants, but now...
You're out the door smoothly.
Yeah, so much smoother.
That's the power of routines.
But McKeown says we don't want to get stuck in a rut either.
He does, yeah. You got to add some variety.
To keep things interesting.
Like Jack Dorsey, Twitter.
Right.
He divides his week into themes.
So each day focuses on something different.
Structure and flexibility.
That sweet spot.
Remember we talked about triggers before?
Those cues that prompt a behavior.
I'm curious how we can use those strategically.
Me too. How do we do it?
Well, we're already surrounded by them, whether we realize it or not.
Okay.
Like that bag of chips sitting on the counter.
Oh, yeah, total trigger.
For snacking, but what if it was a bowl of fruit instead?
You're changing your environment.
Making it easier to choose those essential behaviors.
You're playing mental chess.
Architects of our own choices.
By understanding those triggers.
Exactly.
This is really highlighting how essentialism goes way beyond just productivity.
It's a whole philosophy.
It's about intentionality.
Absolutely. And that's where McKeown takes us next, this idea of living in the now.
Living in the now, okay.
The difference between chronological time, chronos.
And Kairos time.
Kairos, yeah, like recognizing the opportune moment.
There's a time for everything.
Right, but how do we tell the difference?
It's hard, so easy to get caught up in the past.
Or worry about the future.
McKeown says he was feeling overwhelmed after a day of teaching.
And he was surrounded by reminders of all the things he should be doing.
Oh, I know that feeling.
But then he just stopped, took a breath, and asked himself,
What'd he ask?
What's important now?
So simple.
But it's like a reset button.
Yeah, it is.
He's able to regain focus, on what truly mattered right then.
We put so much pressure on ourselves to be constantly doing.
Instead of just being.
Yeah, we forget we can choose what to focus on.
And to help with that, he suggests writing things down.
To get it out of your head.
So you don't have to worry about forgetting. Stay present.
A mental inbox for those thoughts and ideas.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And then he talks about multitasking.
Multitasking, everyone's favorite.
Is it really a myth that we can do multiple things at once?
What does he say?
He thinks it is. He tells a funny story about a former classmate.
Oh, what happened?
He was constantly switching tasks, even checking his phone mid-conversation.
Oh, I know those people. Like they're afraid to miss something.
But they end up missing the present moment.
Exactly.
McKeown says, focus on one thing at a time.
Give it your full attention.
He calls it multifocusing.
I like that. It's not limiting, it's intentional.
Yeah, and he recommends using a timer, even dedicating blocks of time to a single task.
So you're creating those pockets of focus.
Exactly.
I've tried that, and it's amazing how much more I get done.
When you're not constantly switching.
My brain finally has space to think deeply.
And all these principles point toward making a meaningful contribution.
To the world, yeah.
McKeown brings up Gandhi.
Gandhi, okay.
He lived a remarkably simple life.
Focused on his mission.
He talked about reducing himself to zero.
Getting rid of everything non-essential.
Simple clothes. He avoided reading newspapers even.
To reduce mental clutter.
Simplified his diet. Had a day of silence each week.
Wow, that's commitment.
It shows that real impact isn't about having more things.
It's about focusing on what matters.
And his impact was undeniable.
He inspired millions.
We don't need extravagant lives to make a difference.
We can all live more intentionally.
Contribute in ways that align with our values.
It's so inspiring.
It shows essentialism is a way of being, not just a self-help strategy.
And McKeown reminds us it's not about achieving some perfect ideal.
Right, it's a journey.
Of learning and growth.
He even talks about his own struggles with applying these principles.
Makes it relatable.
So it's not about beating yourself up for not being essential enough.
It's about progress, one step at a time.
Exactly.
So how does he stay focused on what matters most?
He mentions two things.
Okay, what are they?
Family.
Of course, that makes sense.
And the reality of our own mortality.
Not in a morbid way, though.
No, as a motivator.
Their time is precious.
Make the most of every moment.
Essentialism is about living a life without regret.
Making choices we can look back on and be proud of.
Choices that reflect our values.
He says it's about asking ourselves.
At the end of my life, what will I wish I had spent my time on?
And then making choices that reflect those answers.
Such a powerful question.
It gets to the heart of it all.
It does. You know, it's interesting, as we've been talking about this, I've been thinking about how these principles aren't just for, personal growth.
Oh, totally.
They apply to so many areas of life.
Work, relationships, even how we design our spaces.
Right. McKeown even talks about essentialism in leadership.
Yeah, he says non-essentialist leaders can actually stifle innovation.
It's like they create these environments where people are afraid to speak up.
To take risks.
And everything stagnates.
It's like a garden full of weeds. Nothing can really grow.
Essentialist leaders, on the other hand, they encourage autonomy.
Give their teams space to experiment.
To contribute their ideas.
Make ownership.
Instead of micromanaging every little detail.
They create conditions for growth.
And innovation.
And he also talks about clear communication.
Making sure everyone understands the mission.
The priorities, no mixed messages.
It's like having a shared map, everyone going in the same direction.
I've been on projects where no one was on the same page.
It's so frustrating.
Exhausting.
And demoralizing.
McKeown also talks about accountability.
But not in a, punishing way.
No, it's more about support and encouragement.
Checking in to see how they can help.
Celebrating those wins.
So it's not about being a dictator, it's being a facilitator.
Someone who empowers their team.
To do their best work.
And you know what? These principles even apply to our physical spaces.
Oh, interesting.
He uses Dieter Rams as an example.
Oh, the designer.
Less but better.
I love his designs. They're so timeless.
And McKeown says we can apply that to our homes and workspaces.
Decluttering, creating a more minimalist space.
It sounds calming just thinking about it.
I recently cleaned out my desk drawers. Yeah. It was amazing how much lighter I felt.
It's not just about aesthetics. It's about that sense of order.
Removing those distractions so we can focus.
What a journey this has been.
It really has. We've covered so much.
From those core principles to applying them in different areas of life.
Work, leadership, even our physical spaces.
It's really a holistic approach to living.
And what's inspiring is that it's not about perfection.
It's about finding what works for you.
Making choices that create a life of meaning. I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
What is it?
It's not about doing less just to do less.
Right.
It's about making space for what truly matters.
Living a life without regret.
A life that reflects our values.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And it's a journey, right? We're going to get caught up sometimes.
In the busyness of life.
Lose sight of our goals.
That happens.
But essentialism is a practice.
Something we work on.
It's those small choices we make each day.
Those moments of reflection.
Those times we say no to protect our time and energy.
For what really matters.
And as we become more in tune with ourselves,
we not only create a better life for ourselves,
but we inspire others too.
A ripple effect.
So powerful.
So as you go about your day,
ask yourself, what's truly essential right now?
And how can you make choices that reflect that?
You have the power to choose.
Choose wisely.
And go make your highest contribution.